Hi everyone, welcome. This is an interview with Professor Haim Bresheeth, who is a well-known and hugely well-regarded scholar. I'd like to start by asking you, Haim, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and also why you have been on the demonstrations to protest the genocide.
Sure. Right. I'm a professor at SOAS. I'm retired now. My history, my academic history is that I started as a historian of media and film and then made the painful conversion to historian of the Middle East and the conflict. Um, my last book is 2020. It's about the IDF and how it created the state of Israel and about all its wars, mainly ones that it lost rather than won. Um, I analyzed there the structure of the Israeli society, which is based around the army. And we could all see that very clearly in the last 15 to 16 months.
Um, what prompted you to go on the various marches that have been taking place in London, Haim? What is it about your past and your history and your own personal history that took you on this path?
Sure. I'm an Israeli, but I wasn't born in Israel. I was born in a refugee camp in Italy after the Second World War. And both my parents are the sole survivors of their families. They survived each Auschwitz and another camp in both cases. And I have no idea how they managed to survive. Each of them were um, 32 kilos when they were freed. My mother was freed by the British in Bergen-Belsen. She was dying from typhoid and was saved by a British woman doctor. And my father was freed by the Americans on the 8th of May. And he was freed in a terrifying camp, worse than Auschwitz, where he was working with other survivors of Auschwitz that were foot marched or death marched all the way from Auschwitz in southern Poland to mid Austria on foot, where 80% of the people died, and those who didn't worked as human mules in huge tunnels where aircraft were built. Now, from this background, you can already understand that someone who is the son of two survivors of the Holocaust is not going to take very kindly to what the Israelis are doing in Gaza. But I have started my political activity as an anti-Zionist more than 50 years ago, which tells you my age. And I'm an anti-Zionist for all this period. The difference being that a lot of people in the last year have rightly decided to oppose Israel because of what it does in Gaza, which is unprecedented. However, those of us who are politically inclined and are against racism, apartheid, and of course, genocide and ethnic cleansing have already, especially those of us who are historians, already seen those things in the history of the Zionist project. And mind you, the genocide started in the 30s, not on the 7th of October 2023. So, for all those reasons, I have been to every demo in London, apart from one where I was in jail and the whole night before and was really unable to come. So I think the reasons are political, are emotional, are personal. You know, the whole the whole person with its academic and personal experience, I feel is against, and so should all of us be, against what is happening in Gaza. And um, I'm a founder of Jewish Network for Palestine, which is a large organization of Jews, anti-Zionist Jews, who are doing their best to bring Israel to some kind of justice, and are using every means at our at our disposal to actually explain Zionism, explain the project of suppressing and expelling Palestinians so that the land can be used by Zionist settler colonials. This is our project.
Um, that's really helpful. And I was going to ask you about the march and the Jewish bloc on the march, but since you've already started to say it, I'd like to just understand from you how you understand and describe the word Zionism, because the word is used a lot nowadays. Previously, there were only a select group of scholars or historians or those who were who understood what was going on in Palestine who used the word. Now it's used by a number of people, and different people perceive it differently. So, could you tell us what you mean by Zionism and
Sure.
what you mean by being an anti-Zionist as well?
Um, I won't tell you the history of the Jewish people now, but it's a long history, and it is typified by something very interesting. The Jewish people in Europe um, have a history of 2,000 years, in which period they were many times the victims of racial hatred, as we know. The modern form of it is anti-Semitism. The name comes from the 19th century. So what the Jews did not experience in this whole long period of their history of 2,000 years is their own genocide. They did not commit genocide. They did not help to commit genocide. They did not have the powers to commit genocide, and they suffered genocide themselves, as we know. So, what happens in the 19th century, the end of the 19th century, when Jewish Zionism follows Christian Zionism, is that Zionism gradually, but in a short period of time, hijacks Judaism and replaces it with Zionist principles. If Judaism was cosmopolitan, internationalist, progressive, many times Jews were in the leading positions of movements for change, like socialism, communism. Um, that history was problematic, of course, for Zionism, because Zionism is basically a settler colonial movement. A very unusual one because it comes at the after the very end of the colonies of the European empires. It is the last, and I hope it's the last. It's the latest, but I hope it's also the last colonial the last colony created mainly by the efforts of the British Empire during the period 1917 to 1947. So it's very different from other colonies because it doesn't actually have a mother country in the same way that British people went to Australia, to New Zealand, to North America, etc., had a mother country. But it actually adopted the British, and the British adopted Zionism. It was a common effort. And in that way, they fought together against the indigenous population of Palestine, the Palestinian Arabs. The Palestinian Arabs are Muslims, are Christian, and also Jewish. I mean, Jews lived in Palestine all this period of 2,000 years, and they were Palestinians. So they were replaced, in a sense, by the efforts of a settler colonial movement, which is brutal, which is militarist. If I said this 10 years ago, I will have to explain, but I don't think anyone ever listening to this needs to be told how brutal and how militarist and how unprecedented this colony is now. Yeah. So in 1947, as a result of many things, but also the Holocaust, the UN, that was a baby 1 year old then, voted to actually do something terrifying, to divide Palestine and give the larger part to a third of the population and the population of the settlers, and the smaller part to the two-thirds of the population, which were the indigenous Palestinians. So since then, Zionism has replaced in the mind and hearts of Jews in Europe, in America, in Australia, in other words, in the West. They only live in the West. And Zionism has replaced Judaism. Zionism has displaced all the value systems that Judaism has developed for 2,000 years in Europe and more than that in the Arab world. And while in Europe, Jews have suffered terribly, in the Arab world, they were near equals. So there are, first of all, different types of Judaism, and there are different histories of those two groups mainly. The European Jews were and remained 90% of the Zionist project, but they are not 90% of the Zionists in Israel today or before. It's mainly about half and half between Arab Jews and European Jews now. Of course, we've got to be very careful by using the word Israeli because it doesn't denote a nationality, despite what people think. There is no Israeli nationality. In other words, no Israeli passport has the nationality of the bearer as Israeli. This might be news to most people. There are 39 accepted nationalities for Israelis. One of them is Jewish, another one is Arab, another one is Christian, and so on. There are many other, of course, Latvian, Ukrainian, Russian, and so on. So this is actually a very strange type of nationality, claiming that all Jews are to come to Israel. This is supposedly what they always wanted. If for 2,000 years they didn't do anything about it, they couldn't have wanted it very much. And for those 2,000 years, it was easier to come to Israel than it has been in the 20th century. So this is a series of lies, memes, myths, inventions, the whole caboodle of ideological creation that is necessary, like it was necessary for the Nazis and other groups, the South Africans, the Americans. They invent a mythology, and that serves them in place of a history. In the case of the Jews, with a group with a very long and rich and very exciting history, they had to reject that history and adopt the myth. So, in a sense, that's what happened at the 19th century. And 50 years after Theodor Herzl, the father of Zionism, has written in his secret diary about emptying Palestine of its people, 50 years ago to almost the day, Palestine was emptied out of three-quarters of its population in 1948. So Zionism is an unusual settler colonial project because it's very late. It's so late that there are no other active colonies alive. And of course, like slavery before it, this is not very popular today. I mean, I'm sure there are some slaves somewhere. But the point is, this is not something that we do in the 20th century, or least of all in the 21st century. Um, Go to a country of the south or east, take it over, um, expel most of the population, kill as many as needed to expel those, take the homes, take the fields, take the cities and towns and villages, not allow them to return. I mean, this is like the worst of colonialism, all mixed into an explosive mixture that goes on exploding all the time, even before 1948. Israel has fought more wars than 10 other countries together. And war is the normal condition of the Israeli. And when I say the Israeli, I do mean the Israeli Jew. And most people think that all Israelis are Jews. That's not true. 23%, almost a quarter, of Israelis are Arabs, are Palestinians. They are not full citizens, but they have more rights than the people in Gaza and the West Bank that have no rights whatsoever, and didn't have a right of any kind since 1967. This is almost 60 years. So, and if you start counting from 1948, when the war ended and the Nakba took place, it's almost 80 years of no rights as Palestinians anywhere in Palestine. So obviously, we are going on marches many years for many decades. This is not the first year or the second year that we're going on marches, but the marches were, at most at the point of Sabra and Shatila, for example, where people knew about Palestine more than they did before, there was a march of 100,000 people, and that was enormous. Remember that in November and December 23, the marches topped 1 million. This has never happened before. But this is just in the UK. Of course, we're talking about marches all over the world. We're talking about hundreds of millions of people around the world that march for Palestine. It sounds a lot, but bearing in mind we are now more than 8 billion, then we still have a long way to go. But Palestine is now attracting more marches around the world than South African apartheid ever did. So if it was true, it was right, it was just to end apartheid in South Africa, why is it not the same for Palestinians who are suffering much more, many, many times more, or in the words of the Archbishop Tutu, um, hundreds of times worse than South African apartheid. After all, the South Africans did not bomb civilians with F-16 and F-35 and 2,000 pound bombs that can kill 1,000 or 2,000 people in a split second. So we are marching. I'm speaking for Jews who do march, who are a minority, a growing minority, one has to say, but still a minority because the majority of Jews find it in themselves to support genocide. Please don't ask me how. I do not know the answer. I'm thinking and writing and researching about it for those 15 or 16 months. I cannot say that I can understand um, the mechanism, the emotional and intellectual mechanism that allows a Jew, in all probability, from a family that was destroyed in the Holocaust, um, to support another Holocaust. I have no idea how they work it together. But to sum up, what has happened in 23 is such a deep shock to Zionist Jews, either in Israel or abroad, that they are now in a social psychosis. That's the only way I can describe it. And that social psychosis is capable of, in a sense, giving a home to um, two emotions that make no sense together. And how a human brain can hold those together, I don't know. But um, what they are able to do, and they are doing, is seeing themselves as the ultimate victims. They are talking about a Holocaust on the 7th of October when 1,200 people, more than half of them soldiers, were killed. But please don't make the mistake that they were killed by Hamas. Some of them were. Near half of the people, and maybe more, were killed by the Israeli forces that came, and by attacking everything around, they killed quite a lot of their own soldiers and their own civilians. So 1,200 people died there. This is a terrible thing. I'm not supporting anyone being killed in that manner, or this is wrong. But remember, that is not a Holocaust. These people, despite what we are told, that was the biggest Jewish anti-Jewish pogrom, as they say again and again, they weren't killed because they were Jewish. They were killed because they were part of a settler colonial project which is harming the Palestinians for 80 years or more, or longer, actually. So we are in the streets because as Jews, we don't want to have anything to do with genocide. We don't want to have anything to do with settler colonialism, with occupation, with apartheid, with the kind of behavior towards the Palestinians that Israel has developed, with the tens of thousands of people who are held without um, any judicial process, administrative detention that goes throughout their life. And the conditions are they are sexually attacked, raped, tortured in many ways. The evidence is available anywhere. We don't want to have anything to do with this fascist army that whose soldiers are singing and dancing about genocide, using things that they find in Palestinian homes where the owners have either fled or died, and they are posting this on social media with sexual memes. I mean, this is not Jewish. There is nothing Jewish about genocide. There's nothing Jewish about this behavior. There's nothing Jewish about settler colonialism, because these are not experiences of Jews or experiences the Jews ever wished or had, So we as Jews are continuing the tradition of liberalism and radicalism that was developed in Europe and the Arab world by Jews. I mean, most of the leadership of communist parties everywhere included leading Jews. This is a history that we don't want any part of, this Israel and Zionism. And we want to stand fast with the Palestinians, fight with them for freedom, for self-determination that they never had because of Zionism, and a just peace between those Jews who want to live in peace, in equality, and also with the refugees that allowed back into their home as the UN has decreed in 1949. So we are a different type of Jews than those of Israel and those of the Zionist movement in Europe and elsewhere. We are the historical Jews that existed everywhere and will continue, I believe, to exist. And their nationality is where they live. There is no nation of Jews. There is a very long tradition, which we are proud of and we are upholding, and we are rejecting everything that Zionism has done, is doing, and probably will continue to do with the conditions that we're now facing.
Thanks, Haim. Can I take you to those marches? Could you tell me a little bit about, you've been on the Jewish bloc at the front of these marches on more than one occasion, many occasions. Could you tell us about a little bit about the atmosphere in the marches in terms of the people who are in the march, and also the atmosphere of the marches in terms of the police surveillance and the police attention to the march, please?
It's a very interesting experience for everyone on the march to see hundreds of Jews, sometimes even 1,000, marching as a block, and always there, normally at the front, um, people who are supportive of Palestine, supportive of the Jewish tradition, because those two things are separate, are not separable. Because in Palestine, Jews, Christians, and Muslims lived together for 2,000 years until Zionism arrived. Together, they lived in peace and harmony, and the only event that broke that was, of course, the Crusades. And if you remember, the Crusaders arriving in Jerusalem killed the Jews, the Muslims, and also the Christians, because the Christians that lived with Jews and Muslims were considered treif. They were considered, unclean. Yeah, they were not kosher anymore. So they killed the lot, 60,000 people over 3 days, and the blood was knee-high in Jerusalem streets. Apart from that period, before and after, Jews lived in peace and in equality in Palestine. And so for us, it's not a new thing to do. We are doing it for decades. More have joined, and we are now much bigger. We are including tens of thousands of followers in the Jewish community, but still we are a growing minority. Now, the experience on the marches is excellent. I'm normally going with a group of descendants of Holocaust survivors because we've got quite a few of those. And we march in the Jewish bloc as part of, this little organization. And people come and kiss us, they hug us, they thank us. They are very moved that people who survived and descendants of those survivors are with them. And it doesn't matter if they're a Christian or Muslim, if they're Arabs or if they're Brits or if they're from Ireland or whatever. People come and they want to take pictures with us, can I have a selfie with you and so on. Now, sometimes, one wants to say to those good people, we're just like you. We're not different. So please don't treat us as if we're doing a great thing because you're doing the same thing. We're just being human. But we don't say that. But we feel it quite a lot. And when they say thank you for being here today, I say thank you. Because then they realize that we are the same. Um, so our existence there, our constant existence, also not just the Jewish bloc, but of course the Haredi Jews who are there and they have to walk 12 kilometers uh, every Saturday they have to walk that because they're not allowed to drive. On the Sabbath. So Jews are doing a lot to support Palestine in order to disprove Zionism. And people really appreciate that. They understand this and they appreciate it. So there is a brotherhood, a sisterhood, a togetherness, a solidarity, a coming together of all religions, believers of all the monotheistic and other religions, and of none. People like myself who are not a believer. I'm a Jew, but not a believer. So we are all coming together as a civic movement. So this is an experience of the British society, which is kind of class-ridden and, also Anglo led for such a long period of history, that to have this coming together of people from Europe, people from the Arab East, people from other countries, from the whole of the empire, um, marching together against the last crime of the empire, I think that gives all of us an identity. The police is there together with the Zionists who come to sing racist songs, who come to taunt us, who come to annoy us. We never look at them. We pass by and the police is there to protect them as if any of them has ever suffered anything in the marches. There was never an attack on Jews. There were a lot of attacks on us. I was attacked a number of times by inflamed Israelis that lost their head and started beating me up. The police never came to support me, to stop them or anything. This is very interesting. So the police believe that they and the Zionist counter marches are on the same time, and they don't just believe it, they are acting it. So we are arrested um, every time. The last Saturday was the worst, of course. The Jews who are taunting us, who are racist, are not. They also include some of the 2,500 British Jews who went to fight in Gaza. People don't know that. Anyone who has fought in Gaza is a genocider. Of course, anyone who supports it and still supports what is going on is a genocider themselves. Sir Keir, for example, he is he is a genocider because he has the Genocide Convention actually calls for arrest and a judicial procedure for anyone who supports a genocide, even though they didn't do the killing themselves. And that duty of bringing them to justice is the duty of all citizens. I can't see this happening at the moment. I can't see Joe Biden ending up in the ICC, and maybe there won't be an ICC because the American current president is very particular about the ICC and wants it dead and buried. But that just shows that what is suffering is not just the Palestinians now, but what is really suffering is international justice, international law, and international humanitarian law, which are now um, on a demise, they disappear. So what we are doing, what we are representing, the Jews and the non-Jews who are in the streets together with the Palestinians in mind and in spirit, what we are representing those people who support the law, who uphold the legal,
Mhm.
uh, the legal word and the legal spirit of the Genocide Convention, and also remember, ICJ has commanded Israel to stop the occupation because it is illegal. We knew that all those years, but somebody decided in the UN that they needed a view from the ICJ, so they now have it. Yes, everyone knows that this is a genocide, but it'll take probably 5 years for the ICJ to say so. Everyone knows that it's illegal. The occupation is illegal. The UN said that in 1967 and every year since. And now we again come to be told that the occupation is illegal. These things, every child should be able to tell that, genocide is not such a good thing. But some grown-ups are unable to do it, especially our leaders. So,
Mhm.
these are, festivals of freedom in the streets of London when Londoners and others from all over Britain are coming, Jews, Christian, Muslims, atheists, everyone, we are saying no,
Yeah.
not just not in our names. We will do everything we can to end this international crime by Israel and the West. And that's why they are so vicious in arresting us, in inventing um, new interpretations of laws that were created to control terror, and now they are controlling freedom of speech.
Mhm.
Um, this is what is now happening.
Can you just, as a final kind of couple of minutes, could you tell us a little bit about um, the arrests that took place and the because when I looked at the video of the people who crossed through those police barriers, the police were explicitly telling them to pass through on a particular side. So it's very surprising to find that the police are saying, "Oh, these people have tried to incite people to break cordons, and therefore some people have been charged, others have been interviewed, including Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonnell. Could you tell us? It was the front of the delegation that was going through. So could you tell us what happened there? And then we'll catch up again another time because I know you have to leave.
Um, basically Jeremy Corbyn told the truth. And the police are lying, and he's saying the police are lying, and he's right. The police said that we broke the barricades, so to speak. Actually, we stood there for 20 minutes and sang, "Let us pass, let us pass, let us pass." We didn't move for 20 minutes until they opened the ranks, and we passed. So probably they just got fed up of us standing there because they wanted to trap us in this kind of kettling operation and then start arresting. So they let us pass and then, of course, arrested some of us, quite a lot. And I understand they give the number 77, but this is not correct. Um, and now they are going to fill the prisons with people who are fighting for the law to be upheld. This is a very poor performance of the legal um, system of Britain, led by a war criminal that was once a lawyer for human rights. How sad is that? So now people are arrested for wishing the genocide to be stopped. In other words, for this support for the UN and the Convention against genocide and the prevention and punishment of genocide. How how twisted can a state be that it arrests its citizens for protecting the law? And they are doing it by breaking every word in the law book.
Thank you, Haim, for your time. I know you have another meeting coming up, but I'm just so grateful that you shared this with us and you spoke so freely and honestly as you always do. Thanks for your time. This recording has been made to share in the public interest with others who are interested in the subject. So thanks for sharing all your thoughts with us. Bye bye, Haim.
Thank you for speaking to me.